Hello tonight. You travel far beyond written chronicles and imperial records into a landscape where water, mist, and silence quietly shape the destiny of people whose names are now lost to time. Imagine a civilization that will one day create magnificent jade treasures and vast engineering works. For now, only endless wetlands rest beneath a quiet sky. You find yourself in the Yangtze River Delta more than 5,000 years ago. A veil of pale mist drifts across endless wetlands as quiet waterways wind through the landscape. Reeds sway softly in the breeze, and the line between land and water appears so blurred that nature seems still in the process of shaping the world. Geological studies suggest that this region once consists of immense wetlands, shaped by rivers flowing toward the East China Sea. Ancient channels wander slowly across the landscape, carrying sediment that gradually creates new islands, mudflats, and floodplains. Water is everywhere. If a modern weather forecaster somehow arrived here, they might spend an entire career reporting variations of exactly the same condition. So, before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. But only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. And while you settle into this journey through deep history, feel free to share your location and local time in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see where listeners are joining from as we gather together across different corners of the world to explore stories carried through thousands of years. Now, slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room. And in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. The wind moves softly through tall grasses, creating a sound like distant whispers exchanged between old friends. Flocks of migratory birds travel across the sky, following routes established long before human memory. Seasonal rains arrive with remarkable consistency, feeding rivers and lakes that support countless forms of life. The entire landscape appears to breathe with a calm rhythm that rarely changes. As daylight spreads across the wetlands, countless subtle sounds emerge. Water laps gently against muddy banks. Insects move through reeds hidden from view. Birds call across open marshes, their voices drifting over still water. There are no roads, no engines, and certainly no electronic alerts demanding immediate attention. The morning unfolds slowly, allowing every sound to occupy its proper place. The Yangtze Delta of this era is one of the richest ecological environments in East Asia. Fish thrive within rivers and lakes. Waterfowl gather in astonishing numbers. Dense vegetation provides food, shelter, and materials for tools. Life is abundant, but abundance still requires understanding. Survival depends upon careful observation of nature rather than attempts to dominate it. You begin to notice that the landscape never truly stands still. Rivers change course over generations. Small ponds appear and disappear. Seasonal floods reshape shorelines and create new channels. The ground beneath your feet is part of a living system, continuously altering itself. Nature acts like a patient artist, making tiny adjustments over centuries instead of rushing to finish the painting. Scattered across these wetlands, small communities gradually establish themselves. Families build simple dwellings upon slightly elevated ground where seasonal flooding poses less danger. Their settlements remain modest, blending into the environment rather than transforming it. Nothing about these villages suggests the emergence of one of ancient China's most remarkable prehistoric cultures. The future arrives quietly. Archaeological discoveries indicate that people have lived throughout this region for many generations before Liangzhu emerges. Pottery fragments, stone tools, and traces of settlements reveal a long process of adaptation. Civilization rarely appears suddenly. Instead, it develops through thousands of ordinary choices repeated across centuries. Great historical transformations often begin with routines so familiar that nobody notices them. As the seasons pass, communities become increasingly skilled at understanding their surroundings. They learn which waterways remain reliable throughout the year and which areas flood most frequently. Knowledge passes from one generation to the next through observation and experience. There are no textbooks, yet an enormous body of practical wisdom accumulates quietly beneath everyday life. The wetlands encourage connection as much as they encourage settlement. Rivers serve as natural highways linking distant groups together. Small boats glide through narrow channels carrying people, goods, and ideas. Even before formal states exist, networks of exchange begin to develop across the landscape. Water becomes both a resource and a pathway, joining communities like threads in a woven tapestry. As evening approaches, golden sunlight settles across the marshes. Reflections shimmer upon calm water, making the world appear twice as large. Clouds drift overhead and beneath your gaze simultaneously. It is easy to imagine families gathering near cooking fires while the last birds of the day settle into the reeds. The scene possesses a quiet beauty that feels almost timeless. One fascinating fact often surprises modern researchers. The wetlands that appear so natural today are already shaping the foundations of future engineering achievements. Long before the famous water management systems of Liangzhu are constructed, generations of observation teach communities how water behaves. Every flood, every channel, and every seasonal shift becomes part of a growing body of knowledge. Night descends gradually across the delta. The sky darkens into deep shades of blue while stars emerge one by one above the wetlands. Their reflections appear upon still pools below, creating the illusion of two heavens separated by a thin layer of earth. The landscape grows quieter, though never completely silent. Water continues its endless conversation with the land. In the darkness, the world feels ancient beyond measure. The reeds sway gently beneath starlight. Frogs call from hidden pools. Cool air drifts across the marshes. Nothing dramatic occurs, yet something important is beginning. The first foundations of a civilization are taking shape within these wetlands. Invisible to anyone who might be searching for grand monuments or powerful rulers, the people living here cannot know what future archaeologists will discover. They do not realize that thousands of years later, scholars will carefully study their settlements, waterways, and artifacts. They simply live according to the rhythms of seasons, rivers, and rain. History often begins in precisely this way, hidden within ordinary lives unfolding beneath extraordinary skies, and so, beneath the vast darkness of the ancient Yangtze Delta, the first quiet footsteps toward Liangzhu begin to appear. No great kingdom yet rises above the marshes. No magnificent jade objects have entered the story. There is only water, mist, patience, and time. Yet from this peaceful landscape, one of the most remarkable civilizations of prehistoric China is slowly preparing to emerge. The wetlands greet each new generation with the same gentle lesson. Water rises, water falls, and life adjusts accordingly. As you continue your journey through the ancient Yangtze Delta, you begin to understand that survival here depends less on strength and more on patience. The people who settle among these rivers learn to observe rather than resist, allowing nature to become their guide. Each season carries familiar patterns. Spring rains swell streams and lakes. Summer warmth encourages plants to flourish across the floodplains. Autumn brings calmer waters and abundant harvests. Winter cools the landscape without silencing it completely. Through centuries of careful observation, communities learn to anticipate these cycles with remarkable accuracy. Nature becomes a calendar written in clouds, currents, and reeds. You can imagine waking before sunrise beside a quiet waterway. Mist hangs low above the surface while birds begin their morning calls. Small boats drift through narrow channels connecting one settlement to another. The day starts slowly, following rhythms established long before anyone remembers their origin. Nobody hurries. The river itself seems to set the schedule. The earliest inhabitants gradually discover that water is not merely a resource. It is also a challenge requiring constant attention. Floods occasionally transform familiar paths into temporary lakes. New channels appear where dry ground once existed. Yet these changes rarely inspire panic. Instead, they encourage adaptation. The landscape behaves much like a cat deciding where to sleep. Impossible to fully predict, but strangely consistent over time. Archaeological evidence suggests that by around 3000 BCE, the people of Liangzhu begin developing sophisticated methods for managing water. This achievement remains one of the most remarkable accomplishments of the Neolithic world. Long before famous empires construct grand canals and dams, these communities are already learning how to guide rivers, control flooding, and protect valuable farmland. Modern researchers have uncovered traces of extensive hydraulic systems surrounding Liangzhu settlements. Earthen dams, levees, reservoirs, and carefully planned waterways reveal an impressive understanding of engineering principles. Some structures extend across considerable distances, requiring coordinated labor from large groups of people. Such projects demonstrate organization and cooperation on a scale previously thought unusual for societies of this period. As you move through this ancient landscape, you notice how every feature appears connected to water. Villages stand upon elevated ground. Pathways follow natural ridges. Fields occupy carefully selected locations where seasonal flooding can be managed. Nothing seems accidental. Generations of experience have transformed environmental knowledge into practical planning, creating communities that work alongside natural processes rather than against them. One fascinating historical fact is that the Liangzhu water management system predates many better-known engineering achievements elsewhere in the world. Scholars continue studying these structures because they provide evidence of large-scale environmental planning far earlier than previously expected. Hidden beneath layers of soil, these ancient earthworks quietly challenge old assumptions about prehistoric societies. The benefits of water control soon become visible across the countryside. Rice cultivation expands steadily throughout the region. Fields spread outward like reflective mosaics, their shallow waters mirroring clouds and sunlight. From a distance, the landscape appears covered with fragments of the sky itself. The effect is so beautiful that even modern photographers might spend hours searching for the perfect angle. Rice proves particularly important because it supports larger populations than many earlier food sources. Reliable harvests reduce uncertainty and encourage permanent settlement. Families invest more time improving homes and communities when they no longer need to move frequently in search of resources. Stability becomes one of the most valuable products generated by the wetlands. Throughout the growing season, the fields require constant attention. Water levels must be monitored carefully. Channels need maintenance. Embankments occasionally require reinforcement after heavy rains. These tasks encourage cooperation among neighbors. Managing water becomes a shared responsibility, bringing communities together through practical necessity. In many ways, the rivers help organize society long before formal governments emerge. As agricultural productivity increases, daily life gradually changes. Some individuals can devote more time to specialized activities beyond food production. Craftspeople refine tools and pottery. Builders improve structures. Leaders coordinate larger projects. Knowledge becomes increasingly diverse within communities. The social landscape grows more complex, much as a river develops additional branches as it approaches the sea. You may notice that complexity rarely arrives with dramatic fanfare. Instead, it grows quietly through countless small improvements accumulated across generations. One family improves rice farming, another perfects boats, while others study floods. Over centuries, these modest contributions combine into remarkable achievements, proving that history often advances through patient cooperation. The waterways continue serving as natural highways connecting distant settlements throughout the delta. Small boats carry rice, timber, pottery, and valuable knowledge between communities. News travels along rivers almost as reliably as goods themselves. Even villages separated by many miles remain linked through shared channels. Gradually, this growing network resembles a living system carrying resources and ideas across the landscape. Evenings remain peaceful despite these gradual developments. As the sun sinks toward the horizon, golden reflections shimmer across flooded rice fields and quiet canals. Farmers return home after long days of work while waterbirds settle among the reeds. Gentle breezes ripple the surface of the wetlands. The landscape feels timeless, even as profound transformations unfold beneath its calm appearance. Within this growing stability, new forms of leadership gradually emerge across the wetlands. Coordinating irrigation channels, maintaining embankments, and organizing seasonal labor require careful planning. Communities increasingly rely on individuals capable of guiding collective efforts. Authority develops slowly through practical responsibilities, becoming part of daily life rather than something imposed through force or formal institutions. As settlements expand, cooperation becomes more important than ever before. Large water management projects cannot be completed by a single family or village alone. Groups must work together across broader areas, sharing labor and knowledge. Leaders help coordinate these efforts, ensuring that canals remain functional and fields receive the water needed to sustain reliable harvests year after year. The success of these systems creates opportunities unavailable to earlier generations. Consistent harvests support larger populations, while larger populations provide labor for increasingly ambitious projects. Each achievement strengthens the next, creating a cycle of growth and stability. Like water gathering momentum through carefully designed channels, the development of Liangzhu society begins flowing steadily toward greater complexity. As night settles once more across the Yangtze Delta, the quiet wetlands reveal a society steadily transforming itself. The rivers still rise and fall with the seasons. Birds still cross the sky along ancient routes, yet beneath these familiar patterns, something new is taking shape. Guided by water, sustained by rice, and strengthened through cooperation, the foundations of Liangzhu civilization continue to grow stronger with every passing generation. Morning arrives gently across the lands of Liangzhu. Before the sun fully rises above the horizon, thin layers of mist drift over the flooded rice fields, softening every shape and distance. You awaken within a world where water reflects the sky and where daily life follows rhythms refined through countless generations. Nothing feels hurried. The landscape itself seems to encourage patience. As dawn slowly spreads across the wetlands, the rice paddies shimmer beneath a veil of soft silver light. Calm water fills the carefully tended fields, reflecting drifting clouds like enormous mirrors. The line between earth and sky becomes wonderfully blurred. Gazing across the landscape, you might briefly imagine that these quiet paddies are not growing rice at all, but gently gathering pieces of the morning heavens. The people of Liangzhu begin their day much as their parents and grandparents once did. Familiar tasks await them each morning. Water levels require inspection. Channels need occasional clearing. Crops must be monitored carefully as they move through different stages of growth. These routines may appear simple, yet they support one of the most productive agricultural systems of the ancient world. Archaeological evidence reveals that rice cultivation reaches a remarkably advanced level within Liangzhu society. Researchers have discovered abundant rice remains, farming tools, and traces of extensive agricultural activity. Compared with many contemporary cultures, the inhabitants of Liangzhu demonstrate an impressive understanding of wet rice agriculture. Their success allows communities to thrive in ways that would have been difficult only a few centuries earlier. Across the settlements, wooden homes stand upon raised foundations designed to reduce the danger posed by seasonal flooding. These elevated structures provide protection while allowing air to circulate beneath the floors. The architecture reflects practical wisdom accumulated over generations. Even today, many people appreciate houses that remain dry during heavy rain, although modern homeowners usually prefer fewer mosquitoes as part of the arrangement. From these homes, narrow paths lead toward waterways that connect the surrounding communities. Small boats drift quietly through canals and channels, carrying people between villages and fields. Water remains the most efficient route for travel. The boats move so smoothly across calm surfaces that they seem less like transportation and more like leaves carried gently by the current. The wetlands continue shaping nearly every aspect of daily life. Fishing supplements agricultural production. Reeds provide useful materials for baskets and other household items. Waterbirds remain a familiar sight across the landscape. Rather than separating themselves from nature, the people of Liangzhu weave their lives into its patterns. Their settlements become part of the environment rather than interruptions within it. As the sun climbs higher, activity spreads across the fields. Farmers work together in carefully organized groups. Some maintain irrigation channels while others tend crops at different stages of growth. Children learn practical skills through observation and participation. Knowledge moves naturally between generations, flowing through families much like water moving through the canals that sustain the rice fields. One fascinating aspect of Liangzhu agriculture is the scale at which it operates. Archaeological studies suggest that rice production becomes extensive enough to support large populations. Such productivity creates stability, and stability encourages growth. Reliable harvests provide more than food. They create opportunities for specialization, trade, leadership, and cultural development. Every grain harvested contributes to a much larger story. At midday, sunlight dances across flooded paddies in countless shimmering reflections. The fields seem alive with movement even when the air remains still. Birds search for food among the shallows while distant boats glide along narrow waterways. The landscape possesses a calm beauty that changes little from season to season. It is easy to understand why communities choose to remain here for generations. The harvest season brings particular significance. Months of careful labor culminate in the gathering of rice that will sustain families throughout the coming year. Harvests strengthen social bonds because success depends upon cooperation. Communities share knowledge, labor, and responsibility. While individuals certainly work hard, the prosperity of Liangzhu ultimately rests upon collective effort rather than isolated achievement. With increased agricultural success comes gradual social change. Not everyone spends their entire day cultivating fields. Some individuals devote more time to crafting tools, producing pottery, or organizing community projects. Specialized roles become increasingly common. The division of labor remains modest compared with later civilizations, yet the first outlines of a more complex society begin to emerge. Archaeologists discover evidence supporting this growing complexity. Differences in housing, burial practices, and material goods suggest that social distinctions become more visible over time. While daily life remains deeply connected to agriculture, some members of society appear to possess greater influence or access to resources than others. The social landscape slowly develops layers, much like sediment accumulating beside a riverbank. Importantly, these changes occur gradually rather than suddenly. There is no single moment when equality disappears and hierarchy arrives. Instead, distinctions emerge through generations of economic growth and organizational development. Communities that successfully manage resources often create leadership structures to coordinate increasingly complex activities. The process unfolds so slowly that most people likely experience it as a natural part of life. Even as Liangzhu society grows increasingly organized and sophisticated, the timeless rhythm of agriculture continues guiding everyday life. The seasons still determine when fields are planted and harvested. Water levels remain carefully watched, and crops still demand patience, skill, and constant attention. Beneath every achievement, prosperity depends upon the enduring partnership between people, fertile soil, and the waters that sustain them. One lesser-known historical detail is that preserved rice remains recovered from Liangzhu sites have provided researchers with valuable information about ancient farming practices. These discoveries allow modern scholars to reconstruct agricultural systems with surprising precision. Tiny grains buried for thousands of years become messengers from the distant past, carrying stories far longer than anyone intended them to survive. As evening approaches, shadows lengthen across the paddies. The mirrors of water that reflected the morning sky now capture the warm colors of sunset. Families return to their homes while boats make their final journeys through the canals. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires. The wetlands settle into another peaceful night after a day shaped by labor, cooperation, and tradition, and so the seasons continue their endless cycle across the lands of Liangzhu. Rice fields stretch beneath morning mist. Elevated homes stand beside winding waterways. Boats move quietly through channels linking one community to another. Beneath this calm and familiar routine, however, society is gradually changing. With every successful harvest, the foundations of a more organized and influential civilization become increasingly visible beneath the tranquil surface of daily life. As generations pass across the fertile wetlands of Liangzhu, prosperity brings more than larger harvests and growing settlements. A deeper layer of society gradually emerges, one woven from symbols, ceremonies, and shared beliefs. You begin to sense that beyond the rice fields and waterways lies another world entirely. It is a world of ritual, where authority draws strength not only from practical leadership but also from the sacred. The rhythm of ceremonial life feels as steady as the turning of the seasons. Just as farmers observe rainfall and water levels, communities gather for rituals that connect daily existence to something larger and less easily explained. These events do not interrupt ordinary life. Instead, they become part of its natural flow, recurring with the familiarity of the moon rising above the wetlands. As morning mist lifts from the fields, preparations sometimes begin within special ceremonial spaces. People arrive carrying offerings, tools, or objects of symbolic importance. Conversations remain quiet. Movements appear deliberate. There is no sense of haste. The atmosphere resembles a carefully practiced tradition repeated so often that every participant understands their role. Without needing lengthy instruction, archaeological discoveries reveal that ritual occupies a remarkably important place within Liangzhu society. Thousands of jade artifacts have been uncovered from burial sites and ceremonial contexts. Their craftsmanship is extraordinary, requiring immense labor and skill. The sheer number of these objects suggests that ritual activity is not a minor feature of life. It stands near the very center of the civilization itself. Jade holds a special significance unlike ordinary materials. Stone tools may help shape the world, but jade seems intended to communicate with it on a different level. Craftsmen spend countless hours polishing surfaces and refining details. The finished objects possess a quiet elegance that remains impressive even after thousands of years. Modern people might spend similar amounts of time staring at phone screens, though the resulting artifacts are usually less archaeological. Creating jade objects is far from easy. Liangzhu artisans work without metal tools capable of cutting stone efficiently. Instead, they rely upon abrasion techniques that require patience and precision. A single object may demand an enormous investment of labor. Such effort suggests that jade carries immense cultural value, unworthy of resources that could otherwise be devoted elsewhere. Among the most famous Liangzhu artifacts are mysterious objects, known today as Kong and Bi. The Kong typically appears as a square outer form surrounding a circular inner opening. The Bai takes the shape of a flat circular disc with a hole at its center. Their designs seem simple at first glance, yet their meanings remain subjects of continuing debate among scholars. Even today, researchers do not fully agree on the purpose of these remarkable objects. Some interpretations suggest connections between heaven and earth. Others propose ceremonial, political, or cosmological significance. Because Liangzhu leaves no written records, the artifacts speak through shape, context, and symbolism rather than words. They remain among the most fascinating unanswered questions in Chinese archaeology. When you picture a Liangzhu artisan shaping a Kong from raw jade, the work feels almost meditative. Slowly, grain by grain, rough stone becomes a refined ceremonial object. Weeks and perhaps months of careful labor are preserved within a single piece. The patience involved is extraordinary, making modern next-day delivery seem wonderfully impatient by comparison. Burial sites provide additional clues about the structure of Liangzhu society. Some tombs contain large quantities of jade objects, while others possess far fewer. These differences suggest that social status becomes increasingly important. Certain individuals appear to hold positions of considerable influence. Their authority may derive not only from wealth or leadership, but also from connections to sacred traditions and ceremonial practices. This relationship between ritual and power becomes one of the defining characteristics of Liangzhu civilization. Leaders do not simply organize labor or manage resources. They also appear to occupy important roles within the spiritual life of their communities. Political authority and religious symbolism become closely intertwined, reinforcing one another through repeated ceremonies and shared beliefs. Across the ceremonial centers, open spaces likely serve as gathering places for important events. While archaeologists cannot reconstruct every detail, evidence suggests the existence of carefully organized ritual landscapes. People come together within these spaces to participate in activities that strengthen collective identity. Shared ceremonies help transform separate villages into a broader cultural community. One fascinating historical fact is that some Liangzhu jade carvings feature distinctive faces or mask-like motifs. These designs often combine human and animal characteristics in ways that remain difficult to interpret. Their repeated appearance suggests symbolic significance, yet their precise meaning continues to elude modern understanding. The ancient artists leave clues, but not complete explanations. As society grows increasingly organized, rituals may also help maintain stability. Ceremonies provide continuity across generations. They create shared experiences that reinforce social order and collective memory. In a world without written laws or formal bureaucracies, belief systems become powerful, tools for encouraging cooperation and preserving cultural traditions over long periods of time. The wetlands surrounding Liangzhu continue their familiar cycles while these developments unfold. Rivers rise and fall. Rice fields produce reliable harvests. Boats travel between settlements. Yet alongside these practical activities exists an invisible network of symbols and meanings. The sacred landscape becomes every bit as important as the physical one, shaping how people understand their place in the world. As afternoon sunlight softens into evening, ceremonial spaces take on a particularly striking appearance. Long shadows stretch across earthen platforms and gathering grounds. The warm glow of sunset reflects upon nearby waterways. You can almost imagine participants standing quietly among jade objects polished to a gentle sheen, surrounded by an atmosphere of reverence and calm. For many generations, this sacred order appears remarkably stable. Agricultural success supports population growth. Water management systems maintain prosperity. Ritual traditions strengthen social cohesion. Leadership remains connected to both practical and spiritual responsibilities. The various parts of Liangzhu society fit together with impressive balance, like carefully arranged stones, supporting one another within an ancient structure. As twilight settles across the ceremonial centers, Liangzhu appears to stand at the height of its prosperity. Rice fields stretch across the wetlands. Waterways remain carefully managed, and sacred jade objects continue carrying meanings understood by generations. The civilization seems balanced, confident, and deeply connected to the rhythms of the landscape. Beneath the fading glow of evening, a society shaped by water, labor, and belief enjoys a period of remarkable stability. The future appears secure, and the familiar cycles of life continue uninterrupted. Yet far beyond the horizon, subtle environmental changes are already beginning to gather, unseen by those living within this peaceful moment. For many generations, the people of Liangzhu live within a world that seems remarkably stable. The rice fields continue to flourish beneath the changing seasons. Waterways remain carefully managed through networks of dams, embankments, and channels. Ritual centers maintain their importance, and communities thrive across the fertile wetlands. Yet history often changes in ways that arrive quietly at first, hidden within patterns so subtle that few notice them. As you move through the landscape, everything still appears familiar. Boats glide across calm waters. Farmers tend the paddies. Children grow up learning the same lessons their ancestors once learned. The rivers continue flowing toward the sea just as they always have. But beneath this appearance of permanence, nature is beginning to alter the rules of a relationship that has endured for centuries. Unlike many civilizations whose histories are marked by invading armies or dramatic battles, Liangzhu may have faced a very different challenge. Archaeologists have found little evidence of widespread warfare destroying the culture. No burned cities dominate the archaeological record. No clear signs point toward a sudden military catastrophe. Instead, researchers increasingly look toward the natural environment itself for answers. The wetlands that once provide prosperity also possess immense power. Water nourishes crops and supports transportation, but it never completely surrenders its independence. Rivers follow their own logic. Rainfall obeys forces beyond human control. Even the most carefully planned engineering systems depend upon environmental conditions remaining within expected limits. Nature can be a generous partner, but it rarely signs long-term agreements. Modern geological studies offer intriguing clues about what happens during the later stages of Liangzhu civilization. Researchers examining sediment layers discover evidence suggesting the occurrence of unusually large flooding events. These deposits preserve a record written not in words, but in mud, sand, and microscopic particles carried by powerful waters across the ancient landscape. The evidence points toward floods of extraordinary scale. At some point near the end of Liangzhu's flourishing period, water may have overwhelmed areas that communities previously considered manageable. The floods do not necessarily arrive as a single catastrophic event. Instead, environmental pressures could have developed gradually, creating increasing difficulties over generations rather than within a single dramatic season. At first, the changes may seem almost insignificant. A familiar channel carries slightly more water than expected. A low-lying field remains flooded longer than usual. Certain planting schedules become less reliable. Such variations are easy to dismiss because unusual weather occasionally occurs in every generation. People adapt, adjust, and continue forward. Life rarely pauses long enough to announce that history is changing direction. The extensive water management systems that once represent Liangzhu's greatest achievement now face growing pressure. Dams and embankments built through generations of labor encounter conditions beyond their original design. Structures that perform reliably for centuries suddenly require more maintenance. Repairs become increasingly frequent. Communities devote additional effort toward preserving a balance that once seems almost effortless. You can imagine experienced farmers discussing changing conditions beside a canal at sunset. Perhaps they notice higher water levels after seasonal rains. Perhaps older residents compare recent floods with memories passed down through previous generations. The conversations remain practical rather than dramatic. After all, nobody expects an entire civilization to change because a river becomes slightly more difficult to predict. One fascinating aspect of environmental change is how rarely it announces itself clearly. Unlike a storm, which arrives with thunder and visible clouds, long-term climatic shifts often unfold gradually. A pattern becomes noticeable only after years or decades. By the time a trend is obvious, communities may already be deeply affected. History sometimes moves with the quiet persistence of water wearing down stone. Researchers studying East Asia's ancient climate have found evidence suggesting periods of increased rainfall during this era. Lakes, wetlands, and river systems throughout parts of the region may have experienced significant environmental fluctuations. While the precise details remain debated, the broader picture points toward a world becoming less predictable than it once appeared. The irony is difficult to miss. Liangzhu's success depends upon understanding and managing water better than many contemporary societies. Their engineering achievements remain among the most impressive of the Neolithic period. Yet the very element that helps create prosperity may also become the source of increasing uncertainty. Water continues to sustain life even as it begins testing the limits of human adaptation. Daily routines still continue. Rice must be planted and harvested. Boats still travel between settlements. Rituals still take place within sacred spaces. Most people likely focus on immediate concerns rather than distant possibilities. Human beings have always possessed a remarkable ability to treat major historical transitions as tomorrow's problem. Provided dinner remains reasonably secure as environmental pressures increase, communities may respond with additional construction and maintenance efforts. Existing infrastructure is reinforced. Water channels are adjusted. New solutions are developed using knowledge accumulated through centuries of experience. These responses demonstrate resilience rather than weakness. The people of Liangzhu are not passive observers. They actively work to preserve the world they have built. Yet every engineering system ultimately depends upon conditions remaining within certain limits. A flood larger than anticipated can challenge even the most sophisticated design. Repeated environmental stress gradually consumes resources and labor. What once feels sustainable begins demanding greater effort simply to maintain existing stability. The balance between people and nature grows more delicate with each passing generation. Meanwhile, the ceremonial centers continue to function. Jade objects still carry sacred meaning. Social structures remain intact. From the perspective of daily life, Liangzhu still appears strong. Visitors traveling through the region might notice prosperous settlements, productive fields, and organized communities. The deeper challenges remain largely hidden beneath the surface, much like the currents moving beneath calm water. As evening settles over the wetlands, reflections shimmer across rivers that appear unchanged from centuries before. Birds continue their migrations. Reeds sway in the wind. The familiar beauty of the landscape remains intact. Yet somewhere beyond immediate perception, environmental forces are gradually reshaping the foundations upon which Liangzhu depends. The changes are not dramatic enough to inspire panic, but they are persistent enough to matter. And so the story moves into a quieter and more uncertain chapter. No invading armies appear on the horizon, and no sudden disaster interrupts daily life. Instead, subtle changes begin unfolding within the landscape itself, almost too gradually for anyone to fully notice at first. The rivers that once sustained prosperity become increasingly difficult to predict. Embankments face mounting pressure, while familiar seasonal patterns grow less dependable. Like many turning points in history, the transformation arrives slowly and silently, carried forward by the steady, patient movement of water across the wetlands. The changes do not arrive all at once. There is no single morning when the people of Liangzhu awaken to discover that their world has become unfamiliar. Instead, the transformation unfolds slowly across generations. The rivers still flow through the wetlands, and the rice fields still shimmer beneath the sun. Yet beneath these familiar scenes, subtle shifts continue to accumulate, like clouds gathering quietly beyond a distant horizon. As you move through the landscape, the weather remains capable of long periods of calm and beauty. Mist still rises above the waterways at dawn. Birds continue their seasonal migrations. The rhythm of daily life appears much the same as it has for centuries. But nature has begun introducing small uncertainties into routines that once feel dependable. The difference is slight enough to ignore, at least at first. Modern climate research suggests that parts of East Asia experience significant environmental fluctuations during the late period of Liangzhu civilization. Changes in rainfall patterns may affect rivers, lakes, and wetlands across large regions. These shifts do not necessarily create immediate disaster. Instead, they gradually alter conditions that communities have relied upon for generations, making familiar landscapes more difficult to predict. The lakes scattered throughout the region begin responding to these changes. Water levels fluctuate in ways that differ from earlier patterns. Some areas remain wetter for longer periods, while others experience conditions that challenge established agricultural routines. The wetlands continue to support life, but they no longer behave with the same reassuring consistency that once defines the region. For farmers, predictability is often more valuable than abundance. A field that produces reliable harvests year after year allows communities to plan for the future. When environmental conditions become uncertain, even productive land can create anxiety. The challenge is not always a lack of resources. Sometimes it is simply the growing difficulty of knowing what to expect from one season to the next. You can imagine experienced farmers standing beside flooded paddies, studying water levels that seem slightly different from those remembered in childhood. Their observations may be subtle. Perhaps rains arrive earlier than expected. Perhaps drainage becomes less effective in certain areas. Such changes do not immediately transform society, but they encourage constant adaptation. The landscape begins asking more complicated questions. The extensive hydraulic systems that once symbolized Liangzhu's mastery of water now require increasing attention. Dams must be inspected more frequently. Channels demand additional maintenance. Reservoirs and embankments face conditions that their builders may never have anticipated. The engineering achievements remain impressive, yet preserving them grows steadily more difficult as environmental pressures increase. One fascinating aspect of ancient societies is how much labor remains invisible within archaeological records. When researchers discover a dam or canal, they see the finished structure. What often remains unseen are the countless hours spent repairing, reinforcing, and maintaining those systems. During periods of environmental instability, that hidden labor may increase dramatically, consuming valuable resources and energy. Communities respond with determination. Generations of accumulated knowledge provide tools for adaptation. People modify farming practices, adjust water management strategies, and continue searching for solutions. Human resilience remains one of the most remarkable constants in history. Faced with new challenges, societies rarely surrender immediately. Instead, they experiment, adapt, and persist through difficult circumstances. Yet adaptation carries costs. Time devoted to maintaining infrastructure is time unavailable for other activities. Resources used to repair flood damage cannot be invested elsewhere. Gradually, the effort required to preserve stability begins increasing. Life continues, but maintaining familiar routines demands more work than it once does. The balance between effort and reward slowly shifts. Within the ceremonial centers, another challenge may be emerging. For generations, ritual traditions help reinforce social cohesion and support systems of leadership. Sacred authority remains closely connected to the stability of the broader community. When society prospers, ceremonial structures appear strong and enduring. When uncertainty grows, people naturally begin asking new questions about old assumptions. The leaders of Liangzhu likely continue performing important ceremonial roles. Rituals still take place. Jade objects still carry symbolic significance. Sacred spaces remain active. Yet environmental pressures create circumstances that no ceremony can fully control. Floodwaters do not pause to admire beautifully crafted jade. Rivers remain indifferent to human expectations. However sincere or deeply held those expectations may be, archaeologists cannot directly observe the thoughts of Liangzhu's people, but they can study patterns left behind in settlements, infrastructure, and ritual sites. These patterns suggest a society confronting increasing challenges rather than experiencing sudden destruction. The evidence points toward gradual change, a process unfolding across decades and generations instead of within a single dramatic moment. As social pressures grow, communities may respond in different ways. Some settlements strengthen cooperation. Others adjust local practices. Families make practical decisions based on changing environmental realities. The experience is unlikely to be identical everywhere. Large civilizations are rarely uniform. Different regions encounter challenges differently, shaped by local geography and resources. Meanwhile, daily life continues beneath skies that remain beautiful despite growing uncertainty. Children still learn skills from their parents. Boats still move along waterways connecting settlements. Harvests still arrive, even if they become less predictable than before. The ordinary moments of life persist. History often unfolds this way, blending continuity and change so thoroughly that they become difficult to separate. One lesser-known fact from environmental archaeology is that ancient climate shifts can sometimes be reconstructed through lake sediments, pollen deposits, and other natural records. These sources provide valuable clues about changing conditions thousands of years ago. Tiny particles preserved beneath layers of mud become silent witnesses to transformations that shape entire civilizations. As evening approaches, dark clouds occasionally gather above the wetlands. Some pass without consequence. Others bring heavy rain that tests the resilience of fields and waterways. To the people living below, each storm represents a practical challenge rather than a historical event. Yet taken together, these countless weather patterns are slowly reshaping the world around them. The sacred order that once seems as stable as the seasons now faces pressures from forces beyond human control. Water levels change. Agricultural routines require adjustment. Engineering systems demand increasing labor. Leadership structures encounter new expectations. None of these developments guarantee collapse, but they introduce uncertainty into a society built upon long-standing patterns of stability and cooperation. And so, beneath gathering clouds both literal and symbolic, Liangzhu enters a period of quiet transformation. The rivers continue flowing. The fields continue producing rice. Rituals continue within sacred spaces. Yet the balance that sustains this remarkable civilization grows more fragile with each passing generation. The changes remain subtle enough to overlook, but persistent enough to matter, carrying the story gradually toward a future no one can yet fully see. The transformation of Liangzhu does not announce itself with the sound of collapsing walls or marching armies. Instead, it unfolds with a quietness that feels almost unsettling. The ceremonial centers that once stand at the heart of society remain physically present across the landscape, yet their role appears to be changing. The rhythms that have guided generations begin to soften. like echoes gradually fading across still water. As you walk through these sacred spaces, the structures themselves seem familiar. Earthen platforms continue to rise above the surrounding wetlands. Pathways remain visible. The waterways still flow nearby, yet something feels different. Fewer gatherings take place. The steady cycle of ceremonies that once reinforces social order appears less constant than before. The centers have not disappeared, but they no longer command the same presence. For centuries, these ceremonial places serve as powerful symbols of unity. They connect communities through shared beliefs and ritual traditions. Leadership draws legitimacy from them. Jade objects carry sacred meaning within them. Entire generations understand their world through ceremonies performed in these spaces. Now, however, subtle signs suggest that the relationship between people and ritual is beginning to change. Archaeologists discover one of the most intriguing clues within the layers of earth left behind. Large numbers of jade artifacts remain buried at important Liangzhu sites. These are not random collections of discarded objects. Many appear to have been placed deliberately and carefully. The deposits suggest intention rather than abandonment. Someone takes great care in deciding where these treasured objects should rest. The discovery is particularly remarkable because jade represents immense value within Liangzhu society. Creating a single kong or bai requires extraordinary labor and skill. These objects are not everyday possessions. They embody centuries of tradition, belief, and craftsmanship. Yet instead of carrying them away or recycling the precious material, many are placed into the ground with surprising care. You can imagine a quiet ceremony taking place beneath an overcast sky. A jade object polished by generations of hands is lowered into a prepared space. No anger accompanies the act. No signs of destruction surround it. The gesture feels respectful, almost reverent. It resembles a farewell rather than a rejection. Even thousands of years later, the intention seems to linger within the archaeological record. This careful burial of jade remains one of the most fascinating mysteries of Liangzhu. Modern scholars continue debating its meaning. Were these offerings to ancestral spirits? Were they part of rituals marking social change? Did communities seek protection during difficult times? Without written records, definitive answers remain beyond reach. The jade remains silent, preserving its secrets with admirable dedication. One thing appears increasingly clear. The archaeological evidence does not support the image of a civilization destroyed overnight. There are no widespread burn layers suggesting massive warfare. No evidence points toward invading armies sweeping across the region and annihilating Liangzhu in a single catastrophic event. The story emerging from the soil is far quieter and considerably more complex. For many years, popular imagination often associates ancient collapses with dramatic endings. We picture cities in flames and desperate final battles, yet history frequently follows different paths. Some societies do not fall suddenly. They gradually transform, adapt, disperse, and evolve into something new. Their disappearance resembles the fading of daylight rather than the extinguishing of a candle. The communities of Liangzhu likely continue living across the wetlands even as ceremonial centers lose importance. People still need food, shelter, and social connections. Boats still move along waterways. Families still raise children. Daily life continues quietly, even as older systems gradually lose influence across society. Environmental pressures may play an important role in this process. As water management systems face increasing challenges and agricultural predictability declines, maintaining large ceremonial institutions becomes more difficult. Resources once directed toward ritual activities may need to support practical concerns instead. Communities adapt their priorities according to changing circumstances, just as they always have. Leadership structures may also face new realities. Ritual authority functions most effectively when society remains stable and prosperous. During periods of uncertainty, communities often look for different solutions to emerging problems. This does not necessarily mean conflict or rebellion. Sometimes it simply reflects a gradual shift in how people organize themselves and understand the world around them. One fascinating historical detail is that some Liangzhu sites contain enormous quantities of jade, artifacts deposited together. The scale of these collections demonstrates the tremendous importance ritual once holds within society. Even as the ceremonial centers decline, the artifacts left behind continue testifying to centuries of cultural achievement. They remain among the finest jade creations of the prehistoric world. As generations pass, certain ceremonial locations see less activity than before. Structures weather slowly beneath the elements. Layers of soil begin accumulating over once important spaces. Reeds and grasses reclaim portions of the landscape. Nature resumes its patient work, covering traces of human activity one season at a time. The process is gradual enough that few individuals likely perceive its full significance. The wetlands themselves continue changing as they always have. Rivers alter their courses. Floodplains shift. Water levels fluctuate according to larger climatic patterns. The environment that helps create Liangzhu now participates in reshaping its legacy. Human achievements remain impressive, but they exist within a natural world, operating according to timescales far larger than any single civilization. Even during periods of decline, beauty remains present. Evening sunlight still reflects across quiet waterways. Mist still drifts over fields at dawn. Birds continue their migrations above the wetlands. The landscape retains much of the same elegance that greets the earliest communities thousands of years earlier. Nature does not mourn civilizations. It simply continues. For modern archaeologists, this quiet ending creates both frustration and fascination. Clear evidence of conquest or disaster would provide straightforward explanations. Instead, Liangzhu offers something more subtle. Its story emerges through fragments, patterns, and careful interpretation. Each discovery adds another piece to a puzzle whose final image remains partially obscured by time. As twilight settles across the former ceremonial centers, you can almost sense the transition taking place. The sacred spaces still exist, but their era of greatest influence is passing. The jade remains buried with dignity. The rituals grow less frequent. The structures stand quietly beneath the changing sky. Nothing dramatic marks the moment, yet history is undeniably moving forward. And so Liangzhu drifts gently into the wider currents of history, much as it once emerged from them. There is no dramatic ending and no single moment of disappearance. Instead, the civilization slowly fades from view, leaving behind jade, waterways, and quiet mysteries that rest beneath the earth, waiting patiently through the centuries. The fading of Liangzhu's ritual centers does not mark the end of the people themselves. Civilizations are often more resilient than the monuments they leave behind. As ceremonial landscapes become quieter and old systems lose influence, life continues across the river valleys and wetlands of eastern China. The story now shifts away from sacred centers and toward the countless journeys carried by ordinary people into an uncertain future. You can imagine families loading simple boats along familiar waterways. The rivers that once connect thriving Liangzhu communities continue serving as pathways through the landscape. Some groups remain where their ancestors have lived for generations. Others gradually move toward new regions, following opportunities created by changing environmental conditions. Human movement becomes part of a broader process of adaptation and renewal. The great river systems of eastern China offer natural routes, linking distant communities. Waterways carry more than people. They transport knowledge, traditions, tools, farming methods, and ideas. Long after political or ceremonial structures weaken, these invisible forms of cultural inheritance continue traveling through the landscape. Unlike monuments, knowledge can move quietly from one generation to the next. Archaeologists believe that many achievements associated with Liangzhu do not disappear when the civilization itself fades. Agricultural practices developed over centuries continue proving valuable in other regions. Experience gained through managing wetlands and cultivating rice remains useful wherever similar environments exist. The lessons learned beside the waters of the Yangtze Delta begin finding new homes beyond their original birthplace. Rice agriculture plays a particularly important role in this cultural legacy. Generations of Liangzhu farmers refine techniques for managing water, selecting planting locations, and maximizing harvests. Such knowledge represents an enormous investment of experience accumulated across centuries. When people move, they carry this expertise with them. Fortunately, agricultural wisdom proves considerably easier to transport than entire wetlands. As settlements emerge elsewhere, traces of Liangzhu influence appear in unexpected places. Archaeologists identify similarities in material culture, settlement organization, and technological practices among later communities. These connections do not necessarily indicate direct migration in every case. Sometimes ideas spread through trade, communication, and observation rather than large-scale population movements. Culture often travels along many different paths at once. The craftsmanship developed within Liangzhu society also leaves lasting impressions. Techniques used in creating tools, pottery, and jade objects continue influencing later traditions. Skilled artisans pass knowledge to apprentices who adapt those methods to new circumstances. Over time, innovations become so widely adopted that their origins grow difficult to identify. Success often achieves a kind of anonymity within history. One fascinating aspect of cultural transmission is how rarely it follows straight lines. Traditions evolve as they move between communities. Ideas are borrowed, modified, combined, and reinterpreted. A technique developed in one region may eventually appear elsewhere in a form its original creators would scarcely recognize. Culture behaves less like a blueprint and more like a river, changing shape while continuing its journey. The archaeological record reveals evidence of continuity between Liangzhu and several later cultures in eastern China. Certain artistic motifs, technological approaches, and social practices appear to survive beyond the decline of the original ceremonial centers. Researchers continue studying these relationships, gradually uncovering connections that span centuries. The story of Liangzhu extends further than its formal existence might suggest. Meanwhile, daily life continues unfolding across the landscape. Farmers cultivate fields, craftspeople shape useful objects, families establish homes in new locations. Children grow up learning traditions inherited from parents and grandparents. Most people are unlikely to think of themselves as participants in a major historical transition. They simply adapt to changing circumstances while carrying familiar knowledge into unfamiliar environments. The wetlands of the Yangtze Delta remain important, but they are no longer the sole stage upon which the story unfolds. Communities emerge across broader regions connected by rivers, lakes, and trade routes. The cultural influence once concentrated within Liangzhu begins dispersing across a larger geographical area. What was once local gradually becomes regional. You may notice how different this process feels from the dramatic rise and fall narratives often associated with ancient civilizations. There is no clear ending followed by a completely separate beginning. Instead, elements of the past flow continuously into the future. New societies inherit ideas from older ones while adding innovations of their own. History resembles a conversation rather than a sequence of isolated events. One lesser-known archaeological observation is that cultural influence often survives far longer than political structures. A government may disappear, but farming methods can endure for centuries. Ritual symbols may evolve while retaining echoes of earlier meanings. Technologies can outlive the societies that invent them. In many ways, ideas prove more durable than buildings. As generations pass, memories of Liangzhu's original ceremonial centers likely become less distinct. Stories change with retelling. Local traditions evolve. Yet the practical achievements of the civilization continue shaping everyday life. Water management techniques remain valuable. Agricultural knowledge remains useful. Social practices continue influencing how communities organize themselves. The legacy persists even when its origins are gradually forgotten. Across eastern China, new cultural traditions begin developing their own identities. These societies face different environments, challenges, and opportunities. They are not simply extensions of Liangzhu. They create something new while building upon inherited foundations. Every generation participates in this process, combining continuity and innovation in ways that move history forward. The rivers continue serving as silent witnesses to these transformations. Boats still travel along familiar waterways. Goods move between communities. Knowledge spreads through countless conversations and shared experiences. The same natural networks that once support Liangzhu now help distribute its cultural legacy across wider regions. Water remains the great connector, linking past and future through motion and exchange. As evening settles across the broad plains and river basins, the traces of Liangzhu become increasingly difficult to isolate. They are no longer confined to a single place or institution. Instead, they exist within practices, skills, and traditions carried by many different communities. The civilization has changed form. Its influence now travels through people rather than monuments. Looking back across the centuries, Liangzhu's story is not simply one of decline. It is equally a story of continuity and renewal. While ceremonial centers gradually fade, their knowledge and traditions continue spreading through later generations. Wisdom developed beside ancient wetlands finds new life elsewhere, proving that influence often survives long after civilizations change. And so, the legacy of Liangzhu continues beyond the civilization itself. Farmers carry knowledge into new landscapes, while artisans preserve skills through changing generations. The name gradually fades from memory, yet its influence remains. Like rivers spreading across a broad plain, ancient ideas continue traveling quietly toward futures their creators never witness. Long after the ceremonial centers of Liangzhu grow quiet and the communities that build them transform into something new, one element of their world continues its journey through time. The rivers keep flowing. The wetlands continue changing. Generations come and go, yet Jade remains, silent, durable, and beautiful. It carries traces of ancient beliefs across centuries that stretch far beyond the lifespan of any single civilization. As you move forward through the story, the contrast becomes striking. Entire settlements disappear beneath layers of earth. Wooden structures decay and return to the soil. Even massive earthworks gradually soften under the influence of weather and vegetation. Jade, however, endures with remarkable persistence. Objects crafted thousands of years earlier retain their shape and polish, waiting patiently for future generations to discover them. For the people of Liangzhu, jade is never merely decorative. Its value extends beyond appearance. The labor required to shape it, the symbolism attached to it, and the ceremonial roles it fulfills all contribute to its importance. These meanings become deeply woven into cultural traditions. Even when societies change, certain ideas prove surprisingly resistant to disappearance. One of the most fascinating developments in Chinese history is the continued reverence for jade long after Liangzhu fades from prominence. Throughout later prehistoric cultures and into the earliest historical periods, jade remains associated with status, ritual, and spiritual significance. The material continues occupying a place unlike any other. Few substances maintain such cultural importance across so many centuries. As new communities emerge across eastern China, they inherit traditions shaped by generations of interaction and exchange. Some customs evolve dramatically, others remain surprisingly familiar. Among the enduring elements is the belief that jade possesses qualities extending beyond its physical form. It becomes linked with virtue, authority, harmony, and sacred meaning in ways that continue developing through time. Archaeologists frequently discover jade artifacts in burial contexts dating to periods long after Liangzhu. Although styles change and new artistic approaches appear, the underlying respect for the material remains evident. The objects continue accompanying individuals into the afterlife, suggesting that jade retains connections to beliefs about existence, identity, and the relationship between the living and the dead. You can imagine a craftsman working centuries after the decline of Liangzhu, shaping a jade object without fully knowing the origins of the tradition he inherits. Techniques have been passed through generations, symbolic meanings have evolved, yet the act itself remains connected to a cultural chain stretching deep into the prehistoric past. History often survives through habits rather than memories. Some scholars suggest that aspects of China's later jade tradition may have roots in cultures such as Liangzhu. While direct connections are difficult to prove conclusively, the continuity is certainly intriguing. The extraordinary emphasis placed upon jade during the Liangzhu period establishes patterns that seem to echo through later centuries. The material becomes one of the most enduring threads linking prehistoric and historical China. The famous philosopher Confucius, writing thousands of years later, associates jade with moral virtues such as wisdom, integrity, and benevolence. By his time, jade has become far more than a ritual object. It serves as a symbol of ideal character. The evolution of these ideas demonstrates how cultural meanings can expand while preserving echoes of much older traditions. Of course, jade itself remains wonderfully indifferent to human interpretations. It spends thousands of years buried beneath the earth without concern for philosophical debates or historical reputations. If jade could express an opinion, it might simply recommend a comfortable underground location and several centuries of uninterrupted rest. Its patience is truly extraordinary. The archaeological record reveals a remarkable variety of jade forms across different periods. Circular bidiscs continue appearing in many later contexts. Other shapes evolve as artistic preferences change. Yet certain design principles display surprising longevity. Scholars often study these similarities carefully, searching for clues about how traditions move through time and across cultural boundaries. One fascinating historical fact is that some Liangzhu jade artifacts are so finely crafted that modern researchers continue studying the techniques used to create them. The precision achieved without metal tools remains impressive even today. These objects remind us that technological sophistication does not always depend upon the materials available. Skill, patience, and knowledge can accomplish extraordinary things. As centuries become millennia, many Liangzhu jade objects remain hidden beneath layers of sediment. Above them, entirely new societies rise and fall. Kingdoms emerge, dynasties expand, Roads, cities, and palaces appear where wetlands and villages once dominate the landscape. Yet beneath the surface, the ancient artifacts continue their long silence, preserving fragments of a world that no longer exists. This hidden continuity creates a curious relationship between past and future. The people who later admire Jade often have little direct knowledge of Liangzhu itself. The civilization's name disappears from memory long before archaeologists rediscover it. Yet some of its cultural influence may persist indirectly through traditions that survive across generations. The connection remains real even when it becomes invisible. The buried jade serves as an archive unlike any written document. It records choices, values, beliefs, and artistic achievements without using words. Each object contains evidence of the society that creates it. Its shape reflects cultural preferences. Its craftsmanship reflects technical knowledge. Its context reveals clues about ritual and social organization. Together, these silent artifacts tell stories that survive long after voices fade. When modern archaeologists carefully uncover a jade object from a Liangzhu site, they are not merely recovering an artifact. They are reopening a conversation interrupted for thousands of years. Every polished surface, carved motif, and ceremonial placement offers another opportunity to understand how ancient people view their world. The jade becomes a messenger carrying information across immense distances in time. Meanwhile, the landscapes once occupied by Liangzhu continue changing. Rivers alter their courses, wetlands expand and contract. New communities build their lives atop the traces of older ones. Nature and history remain intertwined, each shaping the other through gradual processes unfolding across generations. Beneath it all, the jade waits with characteristic calm. As evening settles across the centuries of this story, the significance of jade becomes clearer. Civilizations rise and transform. Political systems appear and disappear. Languages evolve. Yet certain symbols endure because they speak to ideas larger than any single era. Jade becomes one of those symbols, connecting distant generations through shared admiration and meaning, and so the jade continues its quiet journey through time. Buried beneath fields and ancient wetlands, it preserves memories of Liangzhu long after the civilization disappears from view. When uncovered, its polished surfaces still inspire wonder. Across thousands of years, these enduring stones carry fragments of the past farther than any kingdom ever could. As centuries continue their quiet procession across the landscape of China, the world of Liangzhu gradually slips beyond living memory. The wetlands remain, the rivers continue flowing toward the sea, and the jade still rests beneath layers of earth. Yet entirely new chapters of history are beginning to unfold. Small communities evolve into larger societies, and larger societies eventually give rise to some of the earliest states in Chinese civilization. You now find yourself moving through an era where villages become towns, and regional cultures become part of broader political systems. The ancient world of Liangzhu no longer exists in its original form, yet many of the foundations established during prehistoric times continue influencing the future. History rarely starts from nothing. Every new age builds upon countless layers of earlier experience. As the first dynasties emerge, societies become more complex than ever before. Leaders govern larger populations. Trade networks expand across vast distances. New technologies appear. Written language begins preserving information that previous generations can only pass through memory and tradition. The scale of organization grows dramatically, transforming the landscape both physically and culturally. The dynasties that follow construct impressive palaces, defensive walls, ceremonial complexes, and administrative centers. Compared with the settlements of Liangzhu, these achievements seem enormous. Yet beneath the grandeur lies a deeper continuity. Agriculture remains essential. Water management remains crucial. Social organization continues relying upon principles refined across thousands of years of earlier human experience. One of the most important continuities involves the relationship between people and rivers. Throughout Chinese history, successful governments invest tremendous effort into managing waterways, controlling floods, and supporting agriculture. These concerns are not new. Long before emperors issue decrees or bureaucrats maintain records, communities like Liangzhu are already developing sophisticated approaches to understanding and controlling water. You can almost imagine an imperial engineer standing beside a canal centuries later, facing challenges that would seem familiar to Liangzhu's builders. The tools may be different, the scale may be larger, yet the fundamental question remains the same. How can human societies live productively alongside rivers that provide life while occasionally threatening it? Agriculture continues serving as the foundation of prosperity. Rice cultivation spreads and develops further across many regions. Growing populations require increasingly efficient systems of production and distribution. The knowledge accumulated by countless generations of farmers contributes to this process. Much of that knowledge originates so far in the past that its creators have long since been forgotten. The cultural importance of jade also survives into the historical era. Throughout many dynasties, jade remains associated with authority, virtue, refinement, and sacred symbolism. Emperors, nobles, scholars, and artisans all participate in traditions that assign special value to the material. The meanings evolve over time, yet the respect shown toward jade echoes beliefs that reach back into prehistory. One fascinating aspect of Chinese civilization is the extraordinary depth of its cultural memory. Traditions often preserve ideas across immense spans of time. People may no longer remember the names of specific prehistoric communities, but certain practices, symbols, and values continue evolving through generations. The influence of the distant past remains present, even when its origins become obscured. Meanwhile, the physical traces of Liangzhu gradually disappear beneath the changing landscape. Rivers deposit new layers of sediment. Vegetation grows over ancient earthworks. Settlements rise and fall above buried remains. The civilization becomes hidden rather than destroyed, like a story placed carefully inside a sealed container. It waits beneath the surface for a future audience. For centuries, nobody fully understands what lies beneath the wetlands of the Yangtze Delta. Farmers cultivate fields above ancient foundations. Travelers cross landscapes shaped by forgotten engineering projects. Entire dynasties rise and fall without realizing that one of the world's most remarkable prehistoric civilizations rests quietly beneath their feet. History sometimes hides its greatest treasures remarkably well. As Imperial China rises and changes through successive dynasties, the broader human story continues unfolding across the same rivers and fertile plains. Capitals shift, rulers come and go, and political systems evolve with each era. Yet the enduring relationship between people, water, agriculture, and tradition remains remarkably constant. Layer upon layer of experience accumulates over centuries, gradually forming the rich and complex foundation of Chinese civilization. Archaeology eventually begins revealing portions of this hidden past. Researchers uncover jade artifacts, settlement remains, ceremonial sites, and evidence of extensive hydraulic systems. Piece by piece, the forgotten world of Liangzhu emerges from beneath centuries of accumulated soil. What appears lost is gradually rediscovered through careful investigation and patient scholarship. One particularly important milestone arrives in modern times. After decades of archaeological research and international recognition, the archaeological ruins of Liangzhu gain increasing attention from scholars around the world. The discoveries demonstrate that the civilization achieves levels of social organization, engineering, and cultural sophistication far beyond what many earlier researchers expect from such an ancient period. In 2019, the UNESCO World Heritage Committee officially inscribed the archaeological ruins of Liangzhu City on the World Heritage list. The designation recognized Liangzhu as one of the earliest known state-level societies in East Asia, highlighting its sophisticated urban planning, extensive water management system, advanced rice agriculture, and remarkable jade craftsmanship. The recognition affirmed its outstanding importance within the broader story of human civilization. The designation represents more than an academic accomplishment. It serves as a reminder that important chapters of human civilization often remain hidden for long periods before being fully appreciated. The people of Liangzhu leave no surviving written records, yet their achievements speak clearly through archaeology. Their story becomes part of a global understanding of humanity's shared past. Today, visitors, researchers, and students continue exploring the remains of Liangzhu. They walk through landscapes where rivers once support thriving communities. They examine jade objects crafted thousands of years ago. They study evidence of engineering projects that challenge assumptions about prehistoric capabilities. Each discovery adds another voice to a conversation spanning more than 5 millennia. As evening settles across the centuries of this narrative, the empires of China seem to drift past like reflections upon water. Dynasties rise with great ambition and eventually fade. Capitals flourish and decline. Generals, emperors, and scholars leave their marks upon history. Yet beneath those dramatic stories remain quieter foundations established long before the first imperial throne appears. And so the echoes of Liangzhu continue sounding softly through the ages. Hidden beneath wetlands, preserved within jade, and reflected in enduring traditions, the civilization remains present even after its name is forgotten. Between the rise of empires and the passing of centuries, its traces endure like a distant voice carried across calm water, faint, persistent, and impossible to completely silence. As our journey through the world of Liangzhu approaches its final chapter, you find yourself standing once more beside quiet water. The wetlands remain calm beneath the fading light. Rivers continue winding through the plains. Reeds sway gently in the evening breeze. Much has changed across 5,000 years, yet much has remained surprisingly familiar. The landscape itself seems to remember without speaking. When measured against the scale of human life, 5,000 years feels unimaginably distant. Entire civilizations rise and disappear within that span. Languages evolve, kingdoms emerge and fade. Countless generations live, dream, work, and pass into memory. Yet, from the perspective of geological time, 5,000 years is only a brief moment, a small ripple crossing the surface of an ancient lake. The rivers flowing through the Yangtze Delta have witnessed transformations beyond human imagination. They existed before Liangzhu's first settlements appear. They continued flowing during the civilization's rise, prosperity, and gradual decline. They remain present today. Water follows its course through centuries with remarkable patience, rarely concerned with the boundaries people draw around historical eras. You can imagine standing on a riverbank long before Liangzhu exists. The wetlands stretch across the horizon much as they will thousands of years later. Birds migrate overhead. Seasonal rains arrive and depart. The landscape possesses its own rhythms independent of human ambitions. Civilization enters the scene as a brief chapter within a much longer environmental story. The great hydraulic systems that once represent extraordinary achievements eventually become part of the earth itself. Dams erode, channels fill with sediment, reservoirs change shape. Structures built through generations gradually merge with the landscape. Nature does not erase them entirely. Instead, it gently folds them back into the soil from which they originally emerge. The same is true of the ceremonial centers that once stand at the heart of Liangzhu society. Earthen platforms weather beneath rain and wind. Sacred spaces become overgrown with vegetation. The rituals cease. The crowds disappear. Yet traces remain hidden beneath the surface, waiting patiently for future archaeologists to uncover and interpret. Silence becomes a form of preservation. The jade objects endure longest of all. Buried beneath layers of sediment, they rest quietly while centuries pass overhead. Dynasties rise, empires expand, roads are built and forgotten, entire cities appear and vanish. Through it all, the jade remains where it is placed, protected by darkness and time. Few artifacts demonstrate patience on such an impressive scale. One fascinating realization emerges from studying ancient civilizations. Their endings are rarely as complete as they first appear. Elements of Liangzhu survive within later traditions, technologies, and cultural practices. The people disappear into history, but portions of their knowledge continue traveling forward through countless unseen pathways. The past rarely vanishes. More often, it changes form. Archaeology allows modern people to listen carefully to these quiet echoes. A fragment of pottery, a buried canal, or a polished jade artifact can reveal surprising details about lives lived thousands of years ago. The evidence often appears small and ordinary. Yet together, these discoveries reconstruct entire worlds. History survives through fragments assembled patiently across decades of research. The rediscovery of Liangzhu reminds us that important stories can remain hidden for astonishing lengths of time. For centuries, the civilization lies beneath fields and wetlands unnoticed by the wider world. Its achievements are not diminished by being forgotten. They simply wait. Time conceals them without destroying them, preserving a remarkable chapter of human experience beneath the earth. As you look across the wetlands one final time, the landscape feels both familiar and distant. The rice fields, waterways, and open skies connect the present to the deep past. Yet the people are gone. Their voices no longer carry across the water. Their names are lost. Only traces remain, scattered like reflections upon a river at sunset. There is something comforting in this realization. The people of Liangzhu work, create, build, and dream much as people do today. Their achievements are meaningful and their hopes are real. Yet they also become part of a larger story, one that continues unfolding across vast stretches of time. The wind moves softly through the reeds, water laps against distant banks, evening birds settle into the wetlands. These sounds are not so different from those heard thousands of years ago. Nature continues performing its quiet routines with remarkable consistency. The same breeze that touches your face tonight may remind you of countless evenings experienced by people long forgotten. One lesser-known truth about deep history is that most of it unfolds without witnesses. Entire generations live ordinary lives that never appear in written records. Their stories survive only through subtle traces left in the landscape. Archaeology gives these forgotten lives a second chance to be remembered, even if only briefly. In doing so, it expands our understanding of what history truly means. Now the light begins to fade completely. The horizon softens beneath the colors of approaching night. The wetlands become quieter with each passing moment. The details of the landscape blur gently into shadow. What remains is not a sense of loss, but a feeling of continuity. The story never truly ends. It simply becomes part of something larger. The rivers continue flowing through places where Liangzhu once flourishes. They move past buried jade, forgotten foundations, and ancient waterways concealed beneath the earth. They flow as they do before people arrive, and as they likely will long after future generations have passed. Water remains one of the great constants within an ever-changing world, and as darkness settles fully across the plains, history itself seems to grow quieter. The achievements of rulers, artisans, farmers, and priests drift gently into the distance. The noise of centuries fades. The questions that remain unanswered become less urgent. The mysteries become softer around their edges. Everything slows, as though time itself is preparing for sleep. You sit beside the water and listen. The wind brushes across the surface in delicate patterns. The reeds sway almost imperceptibly. Somewhere in the darkness, a bird calls once before falling silent again. There is no need to search for conclusions. The landscape offers none. It simply exists, carrying memories within its soil and waterways. Now the night grows deeper. The wetlands rest beneath a canopy of stars. The rivers continue their endless journey toward the sea. Beneath the earth, Jade lies undisturbed. Above it, the world turns quietly onward. In this vast stillness, 5,000 years feels both immense and impossibly small. History dissolves into silence, and silence dissolves into time. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.